All right, so I want to bring in now Democratic Congressman David Cicilline of Rhode Island. He sits on the Foreign Affairs Committee and the Judiciary Committees. Sir, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Good morning.
Okay, good morning to you. It's great to have you with me. And let's just start off with the House version of what the GOP wanted to do with the ACA was one thing. The president then heard about what was going on the Senate side, which he referred to as mean. We now have the CBO scoring out about this. I just want to get your impression of what do you think is going so wrong that the GOP can't get their act together on something they've campaigned for with repeal and replace the ACA, why they're stalling and can't get it right?
Well, the reason they can't get it right is they promised to repeal the Affordable Care Act, which is working. Millions of people have coverage who didn't have it. And obviously, we have always been willing to work with Republicans to make it work even better, to drive down costs, to increase competition, to make prescription drugs more affordable. So there are things we could do to make it work and to address some of the issues that we're seeing around the country. But they ran on this promise just to get rid of it. And so they've made proposals that would remove 22 million people from health insurance, that would allow insurance companies to impose a crushing age tax, that make deep cuts to Medicare, that rob the Medicare trust fund, and all of this so they can finance a $600 billion tax cut for the richest people in this country. And the American people are too smart for that. They understand that health care is important, and they will continue to fight against a proposal that will
But you would agree, though, that President Obama has said this, too, about, let's keep the ACA, let's fix the areas that need to be fixed. But you heard what Ben Sasse, the senator, just said right there about Democrats need to stop pretending that Obamacare is working. Do you feel like that there is an aspect of pretend with Democrats feeling as if it is working?
Look, no, I think there is no question it's working really well, but there are definitely things we need to address. There are places where it's not working as well as it could, and we have to be willing to work together in a bipartisan way, which we have been, to come up with solutions to improve the Affordable Care Act, to make it work even better for the American people. But Republicans have to give up this idea of repeal and instead say, look, we're going to abandon our notion of repealing the Affordable Care Act, and we'll commit to working with Democrats to make it work even better for the American people. That's why they were sent to Washington, to produce results for the American people. So far, they've been unwilling to work with Democrats at all to make improvements to the Affordable Care Act because they're obsessed with this idea of full repeal. If they'll abandon that, I think we can work together very quickly and make improvements that will drive down costs, that will increase competition, that will make prescription drugs even more affordable. But let's remember, millions of people are benefiting from the Affordable Care Act, and we ought to build on that, not strip it away.
Well, the one thing that we can count on while the Senate is trying to work on crafting something here is the fact that the date and the timing for the president and Vladimir Putin to meet is going to happen during the G20. The White House is saying that there's really no specific agenda set for this meeting. We had reporters on earlier in the hour talking about the fact the White House is downplaying this, but basically saying that whatever the president wants to talk about, they will. What would you hope that the president addresses in this face-to-face meeting with Vladimir Putin?
I hope the president will do something to disabuse the American people of the kind of image they saw when they saw him yucking it up in the Oval Office with the Russian foreign minister and the Russian ambassador, kind of bragging about the fact that he had just fired Jim Comey. This is, by the way, remember, the American media didn't get to see that. It was the Russian media. This is a moment for the president to, number one, make it very clear to Vladimir Putin that Russian interference in our election will not be tolerated, to speak with him about Russian aggression in Crimea, to speak about Russian efforts in Syria to prop up the Assad regime. The idea that the president doesn't have an articulated, well-thought-out agenda for the issues that he intends to discuss with the Russian president and a strategy around that is really alarming. I mean, Vladimir Putin's going to go to this meeting. He's a trained intelligence officer. He's going to go with a very specific strategy with what he's going to try to achieve at this meeting. And this is not a meeting the president can kind of just shoot from the hip. There are serious issues he should be confronting the Russian president about, and he ought to have thought that out carefully with his foreign policy, defense, and military experts.
And meanwhile, sir, on the Hill, with the Senate sending this revised version of a bill that ups the Russian sanctions, also strips the president's power to lift the sanctions, that's scheduled to go to the House on Thursday for consideration. Do you anticipate resistance from the right on that?
I hope not. I think we have got to come together Republicans and Democrats, and recognize this is about protecting the integrity of our democracy. That shouldn't be a Republican or a Democratic issue. We are all Americans. We should be fiercely committed to making sure no foreign government interferes with American elections, and that if they do, they face consequences. Because the Russians are paying attention. They're going to look at what actions we take and don't take, and we can be sure they're coming back. And so we need to send a unified message that we will not allow a foreign government to in any way interfere with our democracy or our elections. And I hope that's a bipartisan message. I hope someday the president will recognize the seriousness of this. And it's hard to imagine he's going to raise it with the Russian president when he continues to describe it as fake news, even though 17 intelligence agencies have confirmed it happened. But this is serious. This is, we're about to celebrate the 4th of July. And if there was ever a moment that the president should recognize that protecting our great democracy is a serious responsibility, this is the weekend to do it.
Sir, I want to get you on the record, though, about this, as we are just ahead of the July 4th holiday. June marks Pride Month for the LGBT community, and you're the co-chair of the LGBT Equality Caucus. This White House gave no endorsement or comment in terms of an observation for the month of June about what this means, but your reaction to the news that the Defense Secretary, Jim Mattis, pushed back a plan to accept transgender military recruits by 6 months, something that had been settled previously.
Yeah, I mean, it's very disappointing. Look, we have the best military in the world, and the reason we do is because we attract the best men and women to serve our country. That should continue to be the standard. There are thousands of transgender Americans who proudly serve in our military. We do a disservice to our country to exclude anyone because of their sexual orientation or gender identity. Any delay in that, I think, is a mistake, and I hope that process will be accelerated. But people should know there are already many, many transgender people serving our country and serving with distinction and honor, risking their lives. And it's particularly disappointing that this president didn't make any recognition of Pride Month. But fortunately, we're going to continue to make progress as a community. I've reintroduced the Equality Act, a comprehensive civil rights bill that will prohibit discrimination based on sexual orientation or gender identity in housing, employment, credit, jury service, public accommodations, and federal funding, a fully comprehensive civil rights bill with over 195 original co-sponsors. So we're going to forge ahead and continue our fight for full equality for the LGBT community, regardless of who's in the White House.
One foot in front of the other, sir. Congressman David Cicilline of Rhode Island. Great to see you. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
All right.